Hey, welcome back for Unit 2 of our American History 2 course here at Waldorf University. And this week, we venture into the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. I think this is a really interesting time in American history. We start to see the urbanization really coming out of industrialization that we saw last week in the text. You've got three different chapters this week, chapters 19, 20, and 21. You can again find the link to those under that US history hyperlink in the syllabus study guide for this week. And then you're going to take that information and work on a couple of different things. This will be very similar to last week. We don't have our first, what I would say, real writing assignment until next week in Unit 3. But this week you have a discussion board again, where on your discussion board you're going to be talking about the Progressive Era, and if it's the right name for the time between 1880 and 1914. So this is an era that goes by a lot of different names. Mark Twain, famous son of Missouri that spent some time here with us in Iowa, he started to call this the Gilded Age. If you know what gilding is, it's kind of that gold veneer you see a lot of times on like buildings. Like I think about the Iowa State Capitol building has 5 golden domes. It's the only state house in the country with 5 golden domes, whatever. But they're just this very thin kind of sheet of gold. Actually, if you took all the gold that's on top of the main dome at the Iowa Capitol, it fit like a tennis ball in your hand. And what Twain was talking about was that it looked shiny on the outside, but wasn't necessarily good internally. And that's what he meant by the Gilded Age. Progressive Era is maybe a more upbeat tone to strike with this, that the Progressive Era was meant to kind of show the progress that was happening out of different public works that were taking place at places like Hull House in Chicago, or different movements that were getting kind of off the ground around the country, things like the populist movement, trying to give people more of a voice, or the rise of things like the temperance movement. But what you got to talk about on the discussion board in your initial post, and then make sure you respond to a classmate again, that's worth half the credit, is the Progressive Era the right name for the time between 1880 and 1914? As you do this, I also want you to think about alternative names you think might better capture this complex moment in American history. So make sure you're getting into those readings. Talk about specific examples from the readings. I think that's a thing, that's a skill to continue to develop. How you're deploying evidence is so important, not just in history, but in anything you're writing ever, or I mean, any conversation you're having. I think this is a skill that is very central to history, but is important in whatever you do or hope to do as you continue on in your career. So talk about specific examples that illustrate your points. Make sure we get a good conversation going there. Your assessment is very similar to last week. You're going to have some matching that you need to do, 11 different options on each question. Again, a good strategy is to go through the reading and be matching those up as you're going through it. And then you've got a question that's more of kind of a creative exercise. I kind of like this because it makes us work on our empathy and moral judgment skill. So this is one of the things we talk about a lot in our residential course here at Waldorf, is that empathy is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Moral judgment is still being able to say, here's what I think right and wrong are. And so what I want you to do is imagine that you're a migrant or immigrant who has lived through kind of this Gilded Age and Progressive Era. And so to do this, you got to kind of put yourself in somebody's shoes. I want you to identify your age, gender, ethnicity, family role, economic class, and the conditions of life where you live. So there's a lot of good examples of specific people within the text. And so one strategy I've seen work for people is putting themselves into a specific person's shoes, or you can be a little bit broader with that. One of the fun ways I've seen people approach this is think about your ancestors. One of my ancestors during this time period was working in the Chicago stockyards. My family on that side had recently emigrated from Ireland, and his first job in America was working on the butchering lines in meat processing in Chicago. I always think about how that had to be a tough day-to-day job, and could be a fun opportunity to get into something like that, maybe with your own story, which I think can be very important in studying history. So kind of with your specifics in mind, explain your feelings about the changes that are coming about during the Gilded Age and the Progressive Era, and use some specific examples from the time period. Make sure you're providing one example of the impact of industrialization and how that's affecting your family and your living conditions. And then make sure you're recreating a person who lived during this period rather than just inserting yourself and your opinions into the past. I think that's an important part of empathy. Times change, and so do our perspectives. So to truly understand the past, you have to kind of think about what it was like to live there, and maybe set aside some of your own experiences and maybe biases as you do that. So make sure you're developing that character, going through putting together that quality character and using some evidence as you do that. Otherwise, keep up the good energy we've got in the class so far, and do your best this week. Good luck.